Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava Kamma. We are up to Perek Gimel Mishnah Yud Aleph. Today's Mishnayot should be Leiru Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Chana bat Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Leavdi ben Chaim lechaim, v'derefua shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, betoch Shah Cholei Israel. The Mishnah deals with cases where it is unclear whether one must pay damages at all, or it is unclear how much he must pay. In situations of this type, the rule is hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, which means the burden of proof rests on the one who wants to take payment from his friend. According to this rule, the person claiming to have suffered damage, who is the one seeking payment, cannot collect unless he proves that his claim is true. The Mishnah begins, Shor shaya rodef achar shor acher. One person's ox was chasing another person's ox, ve'uzak, and the ox being chased was found injured, but it was not known what caused the injury. Ze omer shorcha izik. The owner of the injured ox says, your ox did the damage. V'ze omer lochi ela b'sel laka. But the owner of the chasing ox says, no, rather your ox became injured by pushing itself against a boulder. We apply the standard rule. The burden of proof rests on the one who wants to take payment from his friend. Therefore, the owner of the injured ox cannot collect from the owner of the chasing ox. He cannot collect payment from the owner of the chasing ox unless he proves that the damage was indeed done by the chasing ox. Even though it seems from the circumstances that the injury was inflicted by the chasing ox, that is not enough proof for the owner of the injured ox to be awarded damages. Rather, he must prove, usually by having two witnesses testify in court, that the chasing ox was responsible. And even if the owner of the injured ox says he is sure that the injury was inflicted by the chasing ox, whereas the owner of the chasing ox does not really know what happened, the owner of the injured ox must still bring proof. In a related case, Hayu shnayim rotfim achar echad, there were two oxen, each owned by a different person chasing one ox, which is owned by a third person, and the chased ox was injured by one of the first two oxen, but it's not known which one. The owners of the two chasing oxen disagree about which animal inflicted the injury. Ze omer shorcha izik, this one says your ox did the damage. V'ze omer shorcha izik, and this one says your ox did the damage. Shneim piturin, both of them are exempt from having to pay, unless proof is brought that the damage was done by a particular ox. However, if both of the chasing oxen belong to one person, shneim chayavim, both of them are obligated, meaning the owner of the two chasing oxen is obligated to pay, since the animal that did the damage certainly belongs to him. Now the Mishnah says both oxen are obligated, and that the owner is obligated for the following reason. We have learned that when the damaging ox is a tam, payment is made from the body of the ox, like we learned in chapter 1, Mishnah 4. According to this rule, if the damaging ox is not worth anything or is unavailable, the victim is paid nothing. So in our case, if the two chasing oxen are tamim, and one of them went missing, the owner can claim the damages was done by the missing ox, and he is therefore exempt from paying. The Mishnah hints to this law by saying both oxen are obligated, meaning the obligation is based on the oxen, for the owner is not obligated to pay unless both oxen are available. That's the explanation of the Rav on this case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah presents two more cases in which both of the chasing oxen belong to the same person. In the first case, both of them are tamim. Haya echad gadol, there was one large ox whose value would cover the half damage payment, ve'echad katan, and one small ox whose value was less than half the damage payment. Now the rule cited earlier, the owner of a tam pays from its body, also tells us that he need pay no more than the value of his animal. Hanizak omer gadol izik. The victim says the large one did the damage, in which case he would be entitled to the entire half damage payment. V'hamazik omer lochi ala katan izik. But the damager says no, rather the small one did the damage, in which case he would not have to pay more than the value of the small ox. Echad tam ve'echad muad. The similar cases where one of the chasing oxen was a tam and one was a muad. Hanizak omer muad izik. The victim says the muad did the damage, in which case he would be entitled to full damages, no matter how much the damaging ox is worth. But the damager says, Lochi ala tam izik. No, rather the tam did the damage, in which case he would not have to pay more than the value of the damaging ox. In both of these cases, we applied the rule, the burden of proof is on the one who wants to take payment from his friend. The victim cannot collect payment unless he proves that it was the large ox in the first case or the muad ox in the second case that did the damage. If the victim is unable to prove this, he is not entitled to any payment at all. He may not collect even the smaller amount which the damager agrees that he owes. Since the victim said he was sure that the large ox or the muad did the damage, he has admitted in effect that it was not the other ox. He has therefore denied the damager's statement that the small ox or the tam did the damage, and he has given up his claim even to the amount that the damager agreed to. Now in the following two cases, two oxen owned by one person injured two oxen owned by one person, but it is not known which ox inflicted which injury. Hayu anizokin shnaim. There were two injured oxen. Echad gadol ve'echad katan. One large and one small. V'amazikim shnaim. And there were two attacking oxen. Echad gadol ve'echad katan. One large and one small. Both of them tamim. And the small attacking ox is worth less than half the damage to the large injured ox. Hanizak omer. The victim says gadol izik et gadol ve'katan et katan. The large one injured the large one and the small one injured the small one. Umazik omer, but the damager says lo chi ala katan et gadol vegadol et katan. No, rather the small one injured the large one and the large one injured the small one. In which case he would not have to pay the entire half damage payment for the large injured ox, but only as much as the small attacking ox is worth. Echad tam vechad muad. The similar case is where one of the damaging oxen was a tam and one was a muad, and the tam is worth less than half the damage to the large injured ox. Hanizak omer, the victim says muad izik et gadol v'tam et katan. The muad injured the large one and the tam injured the small one, in which case the damager would have to pay for the entire damage to the large ox. But the damager says lochi el tam et gadol u'muad et katan. No, rather the tam injured the large one and the muad injured the small one, in which case he would not have to pay the entire half damage payment for the large ox, but only as much as his tam ox is worth. In both of these cases we applied the rule, the burden of proof rests on the one who wants to take payment from his friend. Therefore the victim cannot collect payment unless he proves that the injury to his large ox was inflicted by the large ox in the first case or by the muad ox in the second case. And that is the end of Perek Gimel Mishnah Yud Aleph. We continue now with Perek Daled Mishnah Aleph. This chapter continues to discuss the laws of an animal that attacks another animal. The first Mishnah cites a dispute about how damages are paid if a tam ox injured several animals, each of which is owned by a different person. Shor shenagach arba'a v'chamisha shvarim ze achar ze. Now the Mishnah's ruling apply regardless of how many oxen were gored. The phrase 4 or 5 is a figure of speech, just as a preface to the Mishnah. If an ox gored 4 or 5 oxen, one after the other, while remaining a tam, although the ox gored more than 3 times, it remained a tam because the owner was not warned by the court after each goring. Yishalem la'achron shebahem. Its owner pays the half damage payment to the last victim, and the others do not receive anything. Now, this law applies in a specific situation where each victim sees the ox that gored in order to make sure that he would be paid. Once it is in his possession, he is responsible for any damage it does later. Each victim was afraid that the owner or the previous victim might hide the ox that gored and thereby prevent him from being paid, since payment is collected only from the body of the ox. Therefore, each one seized the ox so that he would be able to keep the part of its value that is due to him and return the rest to the owner. Once he seized the ox, he became its legal guardian, a shomer, who is responsible to make sure that the ox does not do any damage in the future. So as far as the original owner is concerned, he is responsible only for the first goring. After making the half payment for that goring, he may keep everything that remains of his ox value after the payment is deducted. If, however, the ox did each goring while still under the original owner's guardianship, would be obligated to make all the half damage payments according to this Tana, he would have to pay the first victim first, the second victim second, and so on until the value of his ox is used up. So again, our Mishnah applies in a very specific situation when it says that the owner pays the half damage payment to the last victim. It's the case where each victim seized the ox that gored in order to make sure that he would be paid. Once it's in his possession, he is responsible for any damage that it does later. After the ox gored the first time, the victim seized it. When it gored the second time, it is the first victim, not the owner, who must pay. The second victim then seized the ox from the first victim, so when it gored the third time, the second victim must pay. The third victim then seized the ox, and so on. If the half damage payment due each victim is the same, for instance 100 zuz, the owner owes 100 zuz to the first victim, who owes 100 zuz to the second victim, who owes 100 zuz to the third victim, etc. The last victim, however, does not owe anything, since the ox did not do any damage after he seized it. Therefore, only the last victim gets to keep his payment, 100 zuz of the animal that he seized, while the others receive nothing. However, if the amount owed the second to last victim is more than the amount owed the last victim, the last victim returns the difference to the one that came before him, meaning the second to last victim. For example, every victim owes 100 zuz to the one that came after him, except for the second to last victim, who owes only 50 zuz to the last one. In this case, the last victim keeps for himself 50 zuz of the animal that he took, and he gives the remaining 50 zuz to the second to last victim. The owner took his animal, its monetary equivalent, back from the last victim. But since he owes 100 zuz to the first victim, which is ultimately owed to the last two victims, he left that amount with the last victim. Of that 100 zuz, the last victim keeps 50 and gives 50 to the victim that came before him. So here too, in our case, the last victim receives everything he is owed, 50 zuz. However, the second to last victim receives less than what he is owed, 50 zuz out of 100, and the others receive nothing. And if the payment owed the third to last victim is more than the total of the payments owed the last two victims together, the last victim returns part of the remainder to the second to last victim and part to the third to last victim, literally the one before the one that was before him. For example, the payment due the third to last victim was 100 zuz. The payment due the second to last victim was 50 zuz. And the payment due the last victim was 20 zuz. In this case, where the last victim is entitled to only 20 zuz, he keeps just 20 zuz of the animal that he took. He gives 30 zuz, the difference between his payment and the previous victim's payment to the previous victim, and he gives 50 zuz, the difference between the second to last victim's payment and the third to last victim's payment to the third to last victim. Therefore, the last victim keeps his 20 zuz, the second to last victim gets 30 zuz, the 50 that he is owed minus the 20 that he owes, and the third to last victim gets 50 zuz, the 100 that he is owed minus the 50 that he owes, and the other victims receive nothing. In every case, regardless of how much each victim is owed, the very last one benefits, since he is the only one that does not have to pay anyone else. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Now again, the last victim always receives at least part of what he is owed. Any of the earlier victims, by contrast, might not receive anything, and that's what the Mishnah means, that the very last one benefits. Again, all this is according to Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Meir, again, if a victim seizes the ox that gored to collect payment from it, he becomes entirely responsible for the ox and must pay for any damage it does in the future. However, if he does not seize it, he is not liable to pay for anything. The next Tana, Rabbi Shimon, disagrees. In his view, even if the victim does not seize the ox that gored, he automatically acquires a share of the animal that equals the amount he is owed. He therefore becomes a part owner of the ox together with the original owner and any other victims, and so he and the original owner share liability for damages. According to this opinion, it makes no difference whether the victim seizes the ox. When an animal or any item is owned by two people, sometimes one watches it and sometimes the other watches it, but both share responsibility for it at all times. So even if the victim seizes the ox, he does not assume any more responsibility than he had before. Rabbi Shimon says, Shor sheveh 200, shenagav shor sheveh 200. If a tam ox were 200 zuz, gored an ox were 200 zuz, killing it. And the carcass of the gored ox is worth nothing. Now the Mishnah specifies that the dead animal is worth nothing in order to make the calculation simpler. If its carcass would have some value, the victim's loss would be the difference between the value of the living animal and the value of the carcass. So we're making it simpler. Zenotel maneh, the victim takes 100 zuz of maneh of the ox that gored as his half damage payment. V'zenotel maneh, and the owner gets to keep the remaining 100 zuz of the ox, meaning the victim and the owner each own half of the animal. Chazal v'nagach shor acher sheveh 200. If it then gored another ox worth 200 zuz, killing it, and the carcass is worth nothing, ha'acharon notel maneh, the last one, the second victim, takes a maneh 100 zuz as his half damage payment. He collects half of his 100 zuz from the first victim and half from the owner, 50 zuz from each, since each one owns half of the animal. Vishelifanav, therefore the outcome regarding those who came before him, the first victim, the owner, is as follows. Zenotel 50 zuz, v'zenotel 50 zuz. The first victim gets to keep 50 zuz of the animal, and the owner gets to keep 50 zuz of it, meaning the owner is left with 50 zuz because he had 100 zuz after the first goring, and then he paid 50 to the second victim. The same is true of the first victim. He also had 100 zuz of which he paid 50 to the second victim. At this point, the second victim owns half of the animal, 100 zuz. The first victim owns a quarter, 50 zuz, and the original owner owns a quarter, 50 zuz. Chazal v'nagach shor acher sheveh 200. If the ox then gores another ox with 200 zuz, killing it, and the carcass is worth nothing, the last one, the third victim, takes a maneh, 100 zuz as half damage payment. He collects his 100 zuz from its three owners, the original owner, the first victim, and the second victim, in proportion to the share of the animal that each one owns. Therefore, he takes half of his payment, 50 zuz from the second victim, a quarter, 25 zuz from the first victim, and a quarter, 25 zuz from the original owner. It emerges, comes out, that the second victim who came before him is left with 50 zuz, and each of the first two, the owner and the first victim, is left with a gold dinar, 25 zuz. The original owner once had full ownership of an ox worth 200 zuz. He then paid 100 zuz to the first victim, 50 to the second victim, and 25 to the third victim, which leaves him with 25 zuz. The first victim received 100, then paid 50 to the second victim, and 25 to the third, which leaves him too with 25 zuz. As for the second victim, he received 100 zuz and then paid 50 zuz to the third victim, which leaves him with 50 zuz. So in summary, Rabbi Meir holds that if a tam ox gores another ox, the victim does not automatically acquire part of the ox that gored. Therefore, if it gores again, it is the owner alone who pays the second victim. If there are several victims, the owner pays the first victim first, the second victim second, and so on until the value of his ox is used up. However, if a victim sees the ox to secure his payment, he alone and not the owner is liable to pay any future victims. If there are several victims and each one sees the ox from the one that came before him, the first victim pays the second pays the third, and so on. According to Rabbi Shimon, though, a victim automatically becomes a part owner of the ox that gored, regardless of whether he seized it. Therefore, he always pays part of all future damages. If there are several victims, the original owner and the first victim share in paying the second victim. All three of them share in paying the third victim, and so on. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.